Yeah, go.
And we are live. JT here, and welcome to The Huddle. The Huddle is where I sit down with successful people from the world of sport and coaching. It's to learn more about their journey to greatness. Why do I have these conversations? Because success always leaves clues. I want to take a moment to thank you, whether you are watching on YouTube or whether you're listening to the audio on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here with me and my special guest today. And here's my friendly reminder to you. The mind is like a parachute. It works best when it's wide open. So my challenge to you is to go all in on this conversation, to remove any distractions and get laser focused on the here and the now. And I guarantee you, you will gain a valuable nugget of wisdom that will not only help you succeed in sport, but more importantly, in the game of life. Been looking forward to my conversation with my special guest today. I've been slowly planting the seeds, asking her a couple of times about coming into the huddle. So I'm grateful that our schedules aligned and we are finally able to come in the huddle and share a bit about her journey. My guest in the huddle today is currently serving as our U18 Team Ontario women's tackle head coach. My guest in the huddle today is Carlie Manners. How are you today, coach?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. And enthused for this conversation, feeling energized. So it's always a great sign. Um, Before we get kicked off, I just want to take a moment to count my blessings. For me, this is a daily practice. Some days I do it better than others, but I do find those days where I'm most intentional, most consistent counting my blessings. I do find those days are filled with a little bit more love, a little bit more joy, a little bit more peace. And I'm a big believer, biggest blessing you can give anyone is your time and energy. So just want to thank you again for blessing us with some of your time and energy here today.
And thank you as well.
Okay. Okay. So, one of the things we like to do in the huddle is to remind others that life is a game and games are supposed to be fun. I had a coaching colleague and a great friend that would remind us that, hey, we all have these things that make us unique and different. Our responsibility is to celebrate them. So I'm curious, what's an interesting fact that a lot of people don't know about you that you'd be open to sharing with our community today?
Uh, I think that some people know that I was a U Sports basketball player, but what many people don't know is that I'd be willing to go on record and to bet that if you crunch the numbers, I probably had the most amount of minutes played for the lowest points ever scored in all of Canadian basketball. And I played 4 years.
I'm curious, being a multi-sport, multi-passionate, high-quality student athlete, what did being involved in different, sports, what was that like for you?
Is incredible. So even from like a really young age, I was
Mhm.
always really drawn to competition in whatever capacity. If it was in like taekwondo and kickboxing, um, baseball and softball became like my fixation for a lot of my childhood and adolescence into teenagehood. Um, but one of the things that really cultivated that for me was actually my dad. He is a big sports guy, loved soccer, tennis. We did a lot of tennis. Um, and every time I came home saying, "Hey, I want to try this sport," he would be like, "That's an incredible opportunity. Let's do it. Let's figure it out." And because of that and having that support, I've been able to play and compete in sports that I would have never thought realistic for
Mm.
me. Um, and it's such a great opportunity because I find now as a coach, I've taken like little pieces of all those different environments.
Mm.
And I think about them in terms of my coaching philosophy and how to communicate with athletes who are also coming from dual sport or multi-sport backgrounds.
Hmm. It's interesting as you share that, because it's a great reminder about the power of sport. And I know, Nelson Mandela had a great quote that talked about the power of sport and how it, can inspire. So I'm curious from your perspective, anyone that knows you, anyone that's watched the journey knows that, you're a high quality athlete. You've transitioned into becoming a high quality coach. Um, so I'm curious, what is a life lesson beyond obviously beautiful father-daughter moments, and it touches my heart as a daughter of a strong and powerful young lady too. But what is one life lesson you've taken from sport that you find yourself still applying to other areas of your life today?
100% that's being coachable.
Hmm.
I have made it very far as an athlete and as a coach by being coachable. So, like I just said about basketball, I was not a proficient basketball player. I'm not a center that's going to put the ball in the hoop. I actually played basketball like an offensive lineman, which makes a lot of sense given the amount of points I scored. But I was able to play 4 years and win coaches awards and contribute to my team by being coachable. And a big part of that for me was setting aside my own ego and understanding that I'm playing within a broader system and figuring out what my role and contribution to that system was going to be. And honestly, that is not something that I just innately knew. As a very competitive softball player, uh, that was my sole focus. It was my entire world growing up. And I would honestly say that I had created this mindset for myself where I had to be perfect. And as long as I was being perfect, I could go 3 for 3 at the plate, no errors in the field, then I was content with myself because it's like I felt like I was being excellent, regardless of how the team actually functioned. But then
Mhm.
transitioning into basketball, a sport where I really didn't know much about it, I was not particularly good, but I have the stature for it. I realized very quickly that I'm not going to be, dropping 30 points a game. That was not within my skill set. So I really had to humble myself and listen to my coaches. And they had a very clear idea of how I was going to fit within this bigger system. And I think that was the most valuable thing that could have happened for me because it also trickles outside of sport. It trickles into my academic life as a PhD candidate, in a professional life, everything. It's understanding where do you fit, how can you contribute to the broader system,
Mhm.
and how do you work best within a team.
Mhm. It's interesting as you share that, and what really resonates with me is I recently went back and rewatched the Chicago Bulls documentary, The Last Dance.
Yeah.
And because you sort of reminded me as you're talking basketball there, but the team needed Michael Jordan to be Michael Jordan, but the team
Mhm.
also needed Scottie Pippen to be Scottie Pippen, right? They needed Dennis Rodman to be Dennis Rodman. They needed Steve Kerr to be Steve Kerr, and so on and so on. So it just really resonates with me that, a big part of humbling yourself is understanding what are my gifts, my talents, and my abilities, and how can I best utilize them to best serve the greater good.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, I think that primed it perfectly for me to become an offensive lineman. Like
Yeah.
starting playing tackle football, I was an H-back, like tight end receiver, and that was out in the Maritime Women's Football League.
Mm.
But when I came back to Ontario, where there's a completely different landscape, then I was now going to be an offensive lineman. And understanding your role and humbling yourself and basically being at all times in service to the rest of the team uh, is part and parcel of what it means to be a good offensive lineman. And I don't think I could have made that transition successfully without
Mhm.
learning those earlier steps from being a good coachable athlete.
Mm. Love that. And it's interesting. I appreciate you sharing the power of being, coachable and being open-minded, because that's something I think we sometimes take for granted, right? As coaches. So I'm curious, what was the inspiration to become more involved with football? I know that football was in the past, but what sort of inspired you to come back to football and really want to just find and create these opportunities within the game?
Yeah, first started playing football in high school in about 2009 at Eastern Commerce in Toronto. And there's like a little bit of a loophole where there wasn't a female equivalent to that sport at that school. I could try out for the men's program. And I did. And I had great coaches who just said yes and allowed me to have that kind of first experience. But after that season, my parents were like, you need to focus on softball. That is your entire life. But through injuries and then going and playing youth sports basketball, during my master's out in New Brunswick at the University of New Brunswick, I got back in touch with football, and specifically women's tackle football in the Maritime Women's Football League. And that was such an incredible inspiration. Like the history, even of that league, starting as a mother daughter league in about 2004, and expanding until the league that they have today, and seeing all these women who are so invested. Some of them had been playing at least like 7, 8, 9 years by the time I was having my rookie season with the Fredericton Lady Gladiators. So I played this one season there, and then I had to come back to Toronto to start my PhD. And I was kind of gutted that I was leaving this community where I could look up to so many athletes. Some of my teammates played on the national team. Some of them never really cared to play on the national team, but like when summer comes around and spring comes around, it's football time. And this like tight knit community was really something that I wanted to replicate when I came back to Toronto. So then I came back to Toronto in about 2019, and I started kind of pushing buttons, seeing, okay, what can we get started here? But then the pandemic happened and everything kind of shut down. So I kind of kept the ideas going, but I had to kind of put it on the back burner. As soon as the pandemic ended, then I was like, yeah, if I want to play, if I want to coach, I have to start trying to build this.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, you talked about your experience, right? And it's interesting, like just hearing your journey, it's a great reminder that everything in our lives up to this point is always preparing us for something greater, right? Everything like,
Yeah.
it's, so I'm curious, as you have been, someone who is helping to be the change, that is helping to lead the change, that is helping to show others what's possible. What has that experience been like for you since coming back to Ontario?
It's been a little bit surreal. It's a lot of imposter syndrome, honestly,
Yeah.
because I think like when I came back, I would have really liked like an opportunity just to be like a positional coach or even just starting mentoring at that level. But when you have to kind of build the team and the structures that you want to coach on, then you have to start being a leader right away. And
Mm-hmm.
that first season when I was a co-head coach with the York Region Lions U18 women's tackle program, I was so nervous
Mm-hmm.
because now I had all these athletes that were looking to me for guidance. And I wanted to make sure that I was giving them the best possible experience so that, their first experience with football, their first experience ever in pads was going to be a positive one, something that they could see themselves growing into and staying with for a long time. So I
Mm-hmm.
felt the pressure quite immensely.
Okay.
Um, but honestly, I think it was like our first padded practice, like the first time after safe contact, and one athlete makes a good tackle, and like the look on their faces for me made everything worth it. Then I was like, this is exactly where I should be.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. As you share that, it's actually two things came up. Was one, that idea, it's interesting because we've sort of been sort of trained and conditioned to believe that we'll feel ready, right, for the next big challenge. And the reality is, as you just highlighted, you'll never feel ready. You just got to decide, am I going to stand on the proverbial cliff and just watch, and am I ready? Am I not? Or you just jump, with 2 feet, and you go. And it's interesting how what drove you, it sounds like, was that, what can I do to provide the best possible experience? What can I do to create more opportunities? It sounded like just reminding yourself of the greater good was what helped you navigate sort of the challenges of taking on a new leadership role.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say to myself, like, what's at stake with this? And honestly, that comes from like my academic life. One of my PhD supervisors will always try and make me understand the bigger picture of something that we're discussing in terms of history or philosophy or something like that. What is the stakes? What are we actually talking about when we talk about these things? So I always say that to myself. And I do that a lot when I'm coaching. I'm like, so what's at stake here? It's not just, us going to Fredericton in the summer and winning gold. The stakes are a lot higher. There's a lot more on the table. It's about all of these athletes who some of them will be possibly returning to a provincial team. Some of them will be doing it for the first time. Some of them could end up being in the huddle in a couple of years with like their own coaching backgrounds. Some of them might never play football again after this. So all of the actions that I take and the way that I lead my staff should be informed by that kind of multiplicity of experiences because there's a lot more at stake than a gold medal.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that hearing you talk, again, it sounds like all those diverse experiences that you've personally experienced in your life, your lived experience, is just reminding you that football is just a vehicle, right? To teach and reinforce greater life lessons, right? Getting people to the next stage of their journey. That's it. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm curious. One of the, since seeing you officially, be named our Team Ontario U18 women's head coach, one of the coolest things I saw was, I think the first week you were named, you were off to different parts of the province. I remember seeing like, okay, nope, making the trip to Sudbury. That's been unique, right? Is seeing how quickly you've moved into action. So I'm curious from your perspective, as we grow opportunities within women and girls in football, what drove you to want to get out into the community and actually connect and just get out and about? Yeah, I'd really love to know, what was the inspiration behind that?
Yeah, well, even last year when I was the offensive line coach, myself and Kyle Cole, who's our defensive coordinator and returning this year, we realized that there are a lot of women playing tackle football that aren't really enveloped into the kind of smaller huddle that we have here that could be playing in the OWFL or that, follow Football Ontario on Instagram, but they are out in these like further places in almost smaller silos. And we need to tap into that to try and give them also the experience that we have, but also give us the experience of having some of these incredible athletes. So when we found out that, up in Sudbury, they're playing 12-a-side tackle football, and they've had over 100 athletes come and try out for one team to play in a high school jamboree against teams in Ottawa. And we're like, this is crazy because, in the GTA, we often struggle to get enough for six-a-side. So as soon as I came in as head coach, Coach Kyle Cole and I sat down and we're like, yeah, we're doing this. This is how we need to start talking about women's football as a broader community, not these kind of smaller little pockets where we're not really speaking to each other. And so we were sure really how it was going to go. So we reached out to high schools in Sudbury and 3 high schools out in Ottawa. And we're like, hey, this is who we are. We want to come in. We can have a quick 15, 20-minute presentation So it was a high school like right here in Toronto, and the coaches were really receptive to it. And when we get out to those schools, a lot of those athletes were like, "Oh yeah, we didn't realize that this was an opportunity for us to play at a provincial level." So even though it might not have it with Sudbury, it translated immediately into athletes registering for our identification camps. But in some of the schools where we didn't see a whole lot of traction, it was worth it that now we're getting in front of them. They're able to put a face to the name, understand that there's opportunities there. And it's something that I think our program will continue doing every year. Just get into those schools and show them that there are possibilities.
Mm. It's interesting as you share that, it seemed to be sort of this underlying theme of, one of the things that you wanted to do was to really focus on building these golden bridges of trust, right? With other leaders in the space. They're
Mm-hmm.
doing a lot of great work that sometimes we just don't know about because they might be, in a community underrepresented or marginalized community where, just don't know. And why it resonates is through this ID camp, there have been at least 3 conversations I've had with strong and powerful leaders that have a wealth of experience in the men's tackle space, but then have transitioned into the women's tackle space now. And one of the things they said was, she's awesome. We need to keep her. But again, like you could really tell how much appreciation there was that you took the time and the energy to actually connect with them and go into their communities, into their schools, and just invite them to be a part.
Yeah, and that means a lot because one of the unexpected things was I wasn't expecting to make such strong connections with the coaches that are there. And being able to, like, they are just such incredible resources and they're so willing to help. They're so generous with their time, their energy, their knowledge,
Mhm.
their resources. So like even now we might be in a position where an athlete hasn't really played tackle football before, but they need equipment for the development camp. I know that there's these high school coaches and in these different centers that are more than willing to help and support our program as much as possible and support me as a coach, which has been such an incredible and unexpected benefit to all of this. So those community connections to me are really important. And I think it's a really important part of the Team Ontario experience and how we need to build this program.
Mhm. And it's interesting, as you share, like I just think of again how this diverse set of experiences, right, of your lived experience has really allowed you to wear many different hats, right? I think, you're the head coach of a provincial program, but you also coach in the community, but then you also, are an academic and PhD candidate. So it's almost like all these experiences, sort of like this true Renaissance person. So I'm curious, how have these wealth of experience, coaching in the community, being at the university, being a provincial team head coach, how do you think these all sort of marry to make you into the strong and powerful leader you are today?
I definitely think it all starts with community coaching. I think that has to be the nucleus because being now leading a provincial program, you have to think about those big structures. But I think what keeps me grounded is knowing that I have now coached in, 2 very, very different geographic regions with 2 very different um, groups of athletes with different socioeconomic backgrounds, cultural backgrounds. And that I think makes me a better provincial coach because I'm able to bring what I learned from my schooling, from the university in terms of like equity, diversity, inclusion, and how do I actually make this fit within the kind of programs that I'm running? How do I better understand the athletes that are showing up to the field?
Mhm.
And a big part of that is understanding that when the team all comes together, not every athlete on the field is arriving having a similar day to the other.
Mhm.
And what is my responsibility as a coach to try and make their experience for these 2 hours on the field positive, but also everything that's going to happen, once they leave this field? Are they still going to be excited to come back the next day? Are they going to have the same resources to even get on the bus and arrive back at practice?
Mhm.
So starting with community coaching has been really helpful for me in seeing a lot of those nuances. And now running a provincial program, now I can start to think, okay, well, now we're bringing athletes from a much larger geographic region. And so now what are some of those considerations? How can we create a program where we might only be together for an ID camp, a development camp, and then the make your roster training camp and nationals? That's the only time that we actually get together. So what are some of the things that I can do online to try and lower those barriers, to try and make them still feel like they are a part of this team,
Mhm.
and that they're being heard and their time is also being respected? So there's, yeah, I try and bring in a lot of those little lessons from all different facets to try and give the best possible experience for the
Mhm.
athletes, but also for my coaches that are on my staff.
Mhm. You bring up an interesting idea, and it's interesting. It's sort of that polarity, right? Where as high performance coaches, one of our goals is, yeah, it is winning on the scoreboard. It is, winning, gold medals, tournaments. But then it's also trying to find that harmony, like you often alluded to, that at the end of the day, our responsibility is to provide the best possible experience. So I'm curious from your perspective, do you think it's easy to find sort of the harmony between the two, or what do you think the relationship is between like providing the best possible experience but understanding high performance? At the end of the day, it's very easy to be results oriented, right? 3D world, wins, losses, championships, wins.
Actually, this is perfect because this is something that we've been talking about quite a bit within our program, because it is really easy to lose sight of that, especially in a dynamic like this where we have 10 days at a national tournament and you just think it's just go, 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 go. It's all results. And I think like our program had kind of been run pretty similarly to that. And it's easy to lose sight of the fact that sometimes, yes, they are high performance athletes. They're expected to be high performance athletes in this environment, but they are also teenagers. Um, so some of the feedback that we had gotten from last year and previous years was sometimes they just need time and space and time to have mental clarity. And I completely understand because I don't think those things are antithetical. I don't think that being a high performance program and giving them the best possible experience or allowing them to have fun are things that can't coexist within the same tournament. In fact, I think
Mhm.
you need to have both in order to get the actual results that we want to get into the gold medal game.
Mhm.
You have to understand that some of them are, they're 15 through 17 years old. And as much as they love football, as much as they're going to be locked in, they are still teenagers. So
Mhm.
we're really focused this year on making sure that they have time to decompress and to sit with all the information that we're giving them to understand that they still need to be like they can watch film, but we're not going to be pulling them constantly into meetings. We have to give them time to rest their bodies and their brains so that when we do need them to be locked in, they have the mental capacity and the time to do that.
Mhm.
So I'm also trying to create like more like fun experiences. If it's just things that are just going to get their brains away from just football for an hour,
Mhm.
I think that's incredibly valuable to our overall success because that also cultivates things like team unity, uh, certainly like their mental performance aspect, but also like trust in us as coaches that
Mhm.
we see them for more than just helmets on the field that are working to give us a gold medal.
Mhm. It's interesting as you share that, right? Again, great reminder that life's all divine timing, right? It's interesting how you and your other coaches are having these conversations about, okay, we had some feedback. Okay, how do we better this? And now, we're having this conversation today. And I'm curious your perspective. one thing that's I've learned is, high quality athletes and coaches, they already have those qualities of being ambitious. They're driven, they're
Mhm.
open-minded and coachable. It's very rarely a question of a willingness to get up and do the work. Very often it's learning how to harness, how to sort of tame the tiger, to tame the lion, right? And just like you said, allow them to be more and just give them that space to so I'm curious, like, is that what are your thoughts on that? It's more about harnessing their power as opposed to like lighting a fire under their proverbial arse.
Yeah, I think one of the unique things about this program for U18 women is you
Mhm.
actually have a little bit of a mix of both
Okay.
because we not a lot of these athletes have been playing tackle football for a long time, most
Okay.
of them less than 3 years. So a lot of them could have been in high performance environments in other sports,
Okay.
but a lot haven't. So there
Mm.
is, you do have to try and cultivate that. You have to like teach them how to practice at a high performance level, teach them how to learn at a high performance level. But then there are athletes who are already like that. And you have to then rein them in. And you have to try and get some of them to kind of like unclench their brain. We had a couple of athletes, like obviously quarterbacks are usually like this, where I'm like almost fighting an iPad away from them. Like you can relax, just
Yeah.
have this meal, relate to your teammates. And I think one of the really difficult things about it is the structure of this tournament is so
Mm.
quick and it's so go, 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 go
Mm.
that they always kind of feel the need that they have to be on all the time. So we have like such polar opposites
Yeah.
where you have to teach some of these athletes how to rise to the high performance occasion,
Mhm.
and also be aware of the fact that they are learning all of these things at the same time, and then
Mm.
also try and harness some of the more chaotic energy of
Yeah.
the athletes that are always locked in
Yeah.
because they can't sustain that for 10 days. It's
Yeah.
completely unrealistic that they are going to be um, performing at like a perfect level from day one of training camp to the gold medal game.
Mm. It's interesting. So as you navigate this and you're starting to ask yourself those questions, right? About, what can we do to provide the best possible experience? Have you thought of, obviously you talked about, creating these virtual opportunities. Are you noticing anything else like ideally you would like to have? Like, is it just, remind them, hey, break bread. It's okay. We can sit down and have a meal, have a conversation. Anything else that you see like from a global perspective as high performance coaches and leaders that we can do to maybe just make the process a little bit more joyful, less, grind, 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 grind.
Yeah. Going into the tournament, we're planning on um, just having like meetings, just like not an interview, just I want to get to know who you are.
Mhm.
Um, just so that we can understand how they might respond to some feedback, some things about who they are as people. And that is really important that I found because especially with this age group, you have to know who needs time to put on headphones and to recoup, and who wants to chalk talk it out. But we're also going to just do other things because I think it's really important to try and get that team unity aspect. Start creating a culture, even when we can't be together every single day. And I've had some really great coaches that I work with in other capacities that have given me such great ideas on how to cultivate that.
Mm.
So we're gonna, on the days leading up to us actually getting together, we're gonna do like a song of the day. Every athlete, every coach will sign up for one day on a Google Drive, and it's your time. Just drop a song into the group chat. You can preface it with this could be your favorite song of all time. It could be a song that you just really like right now. It could be a song that you want everyone to really reflect on, whatever that might be, because I relate to people really well through music.
Mm.
And I think it's a cool opportunity to get them talking to each other, start getting them comfortable before we get to training camp, um, and to try and get them a little bit closer to each other because if they're already starting to feel comfortable before we get to training camp, then those moments where they're able to kind of take a breath, hang out with each other, if we give them a couple hours in the evening, they already have those connections. They can cultivate a lot of that on their own.
Mhm.
We don't have to micromanage every moment of their time and be like, all right, this is this time for designated fun. But another thing we're going to do is these like inter squad games. They'll be completely unrelated to football. Split the team in half. We'll have a trivia night, um, like a get to know you about the coaches and the athletes that have to answer, a photo scavenger hunt, like every day, just as we're around the campus, they have to take a photo of something and contribute at the end. They'll tally up the points, whatever it might be, to get their brains off of the fact that, oh, okay, well, on Thursday we have to play Saskatchewan, because for most of the rest of the day, that's what we're going to be talking about. But if there's a little bit of time where they can think about something else, that is perfect. That is
Mhm.
exactly what I want.
That's so cool. One, I love the first activity because music, like food, is it's a bond, right? Like who doesn't like a great song? Who doesn't like great food, right? So I love that. The other thing that I think is really ingenious is like the idea of a simple thing like a scavenger hunt, right? Like forcing them in a loving way to get outside and see a new surrounding. The former geography teacher in me loves the fact of, those are some of the best way to sort of get people out and about and actually learning without them realizing they're learning anything. And I think it's so powerful, especially in today's age, where that was one thing I've noticed the last couple of years traveling to national tournaments is that it's so easy to go into our tech-driven phones that if we just leave them to their own devices, it's a habit. It's not, they're not doing it. It's just it's a younger generation that this is what they know. This is what they do, and this is what they've grown up with. So I love the fact of you're sort of challenging them to get out and about because you're going to replace your essentially the phone by getting out and about, getting fresh air, getting physical activity, getting to know each other, and just learning about their environment. So that's ingenious, but love it.
Yeah, I mean, they might not love me as soon as we get to the tournament because I'm a big like no phones, headphones, or anything in meetings. We
Mhm.
put it on the front. No phones or anything during mealtime. Like those are times for you to be learning, for you to be
Mhm.
bonding with your teammates. Um, they always have time to be on their phones. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be in those environments, but we'll see
Yeah.
how it goes. I usually get quite a few eye rolls.
It's interesting, right? As a catalyst of change, which you are, it's interesting when people are rolling their eyes, it's a sign that you're challenging the status quo. Right?
Yeah.
That's a feedback that you're doing something different. um, so I'm curious, watching you as one of the leaders and seeing some of our leaders in our football Ontario family. It's like watching many of you, like it's like you're on a rocket ship. It's like seeing all these opportunities coming in. I'm seeing all these amazing, strong, and powerful leaders that are showing the next generation, right? Like I think of showing my daughter, like, hey, there's a lot of opportunity here, right? Either as an athlete, as a coach, as a administrator. What do you think needs to happen from a next level? Like it seems like people are becoming more aware. There seems to be definitely more when the NFL does a symposium to bring together some of the leaders in the women and girls space. Okay, people are taking notice. What do you think needs to happen for thing to really take things like to the next level to like 10x this thing?
I always say that it's what we need is like more time, energy, resources. And resources often comes through when we get to conversations about money.
Mhm.
But I think like those investments in a community level is what's going to bring things to the next level. Because right now, like things are great. We're kind of exploding in women's football, especially like women's tackle so quickly in Ontario, where we were previously quite a bit behind every other province. But we still need to try and get more athletes into those spaces. Because right now it's still at a point where there might be some interest in trying the sport, but it's expensive realistically. And parents aren't always willing to like allow their kid to try a sport at that price tag they're not sure they're going to stick with.
Mm-hmm.
So I always think a lot about like the development aspect and like how can I create a program that has a really low cost per player to try and get as many people into the door as possible.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the place where you're going to be able to cultivate that love for football in a different way. That isn't just as a spectator. Because there's a lot of women that just watch football and they love football, but they don't see those opportunities being reflected as some with them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're doing a better job now at different levels.
Mm-hmm.
Like I see a lot of the officials clinics being a lot more open, more accessible. That is great. Like I've seen quite a few officials clinics recently that are free for like the first level certification. Those
Mm-hmm.
things, lowering those barriers, I think is going to open up and allow people to get into those spaces and see what sticks for them. It could be
Mm-hmm.
for them just as an athlete. It could be in like football operations, starting in as a manager, in coaching, in like program development. But right now, because of just the nature of the sport, I think even on the men's side, things are expensive. Things like buses, field times, all those things, all centers are still kind of struggling with how to handle. But those barriers are still present when it comes to expanding women's involvement in the sport.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting you share that, right? Like that idea of like, it's great to say football for all, but it's just acknowledging the fact that to make football for all, we got to make it more accessible. And very from
Yeah.
accessibility standpoint, programming's great, right? Programming can start, but are we really creating real and lasting financial models, right? That actually can make this, again, when Coach Manners moves on to her next opportunity, like, do we have someone that can continue to take the ball and run with it, right? So it's definitely a conversation that I find is around in my head a lot. Is like, how do we? It's great, but is this real? Is this lasting? Is this sustainable? So,
Yeah.
um, I'm curious. Have you seen anything in terms of like how we can make this more real, more lasting, more sustainable so we can kind of keep the momentum going?
Yeah, I actually think we're doing a pretty good job right now.
Right.
And I'm seeing that because we're at a really interesting point in women's tackle where, the athletes that really got in on the ground floor, they started, about 3 years ago when this was all taking off. A lot of them are aging out, which seems crazy because they're like 18 years old. But now they're looking for opportunities. I find myself writing reference letters for former athletes to get into positions with different professional programs as mentee coaches. They're taking on opportunities in their community, and that is really exciting to see. So it means we are doing something right, and
Mm-hmm.
having the women's football conference was also incredible because there were so many young women there who, for a lot of them, for the first time, are thinking about, oh, just because I can't continue playing tackle football, I can continue playing in other capacities in flag, contact flag,
Mm-hmm.
or I could start coaching. Like them asking about how to get set up with NCCP courses. All of those things, like we're now at the time where we're starting to see that shift that is
Mm-hmm.
showing that like this could be sustainable, and we're doing the right things. It's just ensuring that they're able to stick with it.
Yeah.
And I think with those of us who are kind of already in that space, it's
Mm-hmm.
just a matter of keep beating down the doors, keep making those spaces more and more accessible for them when they do come in.
It's interesting, like as you share that, it's a great reminder on what long-term athlete development really is about, right? It's
Yeah.
about active for life. So when they age out, from a Team Ontario perspective at 18, yeah, what's the next step? And I think of one of our U18 Team Ontario athletes that will be joining you at U of T. And I think from a flag perspective, that's going to be playing flag football. I think of another one who's helping coach our U14 men's tackle program now, right? So and then, okay, how do we keep them involved? Like what can we do? What barriers can we remove so that we can get them what they need so that they can, realize like, just keep them within the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, I think it's just about showing them that there's opportunities.
Yeah.
And it's certainly the way that I was. Like, it's at any point, if I saw a door, I'm going through it. And I think if we keep showing that there's a possibility there, those who
Yeah.
want to be in those spaces, like these girls are going to run headfirst through the door to make sure that they can claim the spot. So if we just kind of keep that momentum and try and keep with the trajectory that we're on,
Yeah.
we're already following a pretty good path and so rapidly.
Yeah. Absolutely. I want to be respectful of your time, coach, because again, I know your time and energy are in demand. So I got one last question for you. Um, let's say there's, a younger version of you out there, maybe they're 14 or 15, and they're kind of thinking about, what's next. Maybe they're, exploring the idea of maybe, hey, maybe I want to go out for community football. Maybe I want to kind of see what this Team Ontario thing is about. Maybe I want to become an official. Maybe I want to get coaching administration. If you could offer them one, piece of advice, some words of wisdom, kind of they're wondering like, where do I even start? What would you share with them?
Just go. It's everything I think feels daunting when you don't know how it's going to pan out. If it's a new experience, it seems like, okay, well, there's going to be 10,000 reasons as to why you probably shouldn't do it, why you shouldn't go out for that first practice, why you shouldn't sign up for that course. But you just have to take that first step. Because I find, especially in this community, once you take that first step, there is an entire world that is incredibly welcoming to try and keep you there. And that is honestly my advice to all young women who are kind of considering this. And I think there is this conception of football that might not be entirely correct. And I think it is incredibly welcoming for women, especially for young women at this age. I don't think there's any other sport where all body sizes are encouraged. So there's a lot of athletes like myself at that age. I wouldn't have seen myself as a high performance athlete in a sport other than like softball. But in this space, they absolutely can be. Um, so it's about taking that first step that is the most crucial. Don't give yourself any excuses as to not.
And if anyone, is thinking just go, if anyone wants to learn more about, the Team Ontario program, or they just want to kind of, follow along on your journey as a source of inspiration, is there anywhere where people can connect you, where they can kind of follow the journey? Yeah, would love to share it with our community.
Yeah. Anyone can contact me at any time. I'm pretty active on Instagram at Carlie Manners. I always love talking about football, love connecting people with resources. Um, yeah, I'm basically available all the time for football.
Awesome. So I'll be share out your social handle in the description, either on YouTube or on the podcast. Um, Carlie, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you. I want to acknowledge you for, the great daughter you are, the great really teacher, coach, mentor, but more importantly, the amazing human being you are. The one thing I've really gained from this conversation is how you are using your diverse background, your lived experiences, and how you're just using it in the service of others. How you're so focused on let's just provide the best possible experience for student athletes, for coaches, for everyone. And it's such a simple reminder, but a powerful one. So I just want to thank you for providing us with those words of wisdom today. So thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me. Definitely wanted to be in the huddle for a little bit, so I'm really glad we were able to connect.
Absolutely. So folks, Coach Manners dropped so many valuable nuggets of wisdom that will not only help you succeed in sport, but more importantly, in the game of life. But as I like to remind you every week in the huddle, knowledge is potential power. It's a consistent and focused application of great knowledge that actually creates greater results in your life. So my challenge to you is to take one of these valuable nuggets of wisdom and go apply it to your life today. And as I like to remind you every week in the huddle, you are deserving of greatness. You are worthy of greatness. You are greatness. And my only ask from these conversations, if it resonated with you, if it touched your heart, then please share it with a friend, a loved one, a teammate, or just someone you feel that would benefit from listening to these positive, inspiring, and empowering ideas. The more people we have listening, understanding, and applying these simple principles to their life, the more blessed this world will be. As always, love having these conversations with you in the huddle. Have a blessed rest of your day, everyone.